morning, everyone, and welcome to the Zoom service of UUCC, the Unitarian Church of Canandaigua. UUC is a congregation that fosters personal and spiritual growth through religious exploration in search of the truth while celebrating diversity and affirming the worth and dignity of every person. We are glad that you are joining us, whether this is your first time or your 100th time or more than that even. I'm Pat Harris, and I'm your worship coordinator. And our speaker today is Scobie Beer, and he's going to be helping us think about transitions and things that make transitions, interesting things. I'm going to highlight Eileen, who's going to do our announcements.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eileen. I'm your minister, and I have just a couple quick announcements to share with you as we begin today. If I can get my screen to work. Here we go. We're going backwards. The first is some dates to remember in the month of June, some odd dates for our services. So on June 13th, the second Sunday of June, we will hold our annual congregational meeting right here on Zoom as soon as the service is over. So we'll begin that at about 11 o'clock. And there, if you are a voting member of the congregation, we encourage you to come to that meeting right after our service that day to vote on our annual budget for the upcoming year, on our new board members, and you can find those things, the annual budget, the slate of board members up for election and re-election, and the board president and ministers and committee reports, all on the porch at church in a bin, or if you prefer, on our website. The link will be in your chat momentarily. Then on June 20th, weather pending, we really hope it's great weather, we will have a drive-in outdoor flower ceremony service. So we encourage everybody to come to that. It's sort of a soft outdoor reopening, although we'll be online this summer for our services. On June 27th, we will join Unitarian Universalists from across the country in Canada in the General Assembly worship, which is at noon. So it's an odd time to remember, but if you forget the time, or if you want some fellowship with your fellow congregants, you can come to our regular worship link at 10 a.m. for a coffee hour. If you show up looking for worship at 10 a.m., we will make sure you get that link for noon, where we will join UUs across the country. And then we are thinking we are going to have the possibility of reopening, partial reopening in the fall. And we're going to need some support if we make that happen. So we're going to need ushers and greeters, which maybe you have done for a long time. You'll have a few new instructions about how to do that in the age of COVID safety. We'll need a camera operator, which sounds like something you maybe should have gone to film school for. We're not that going to be that fancy about it. If you can point a lens at a thing, you can be a camera operator in our sanctuary. We're going to need some tech assistance, which will consist of as simple as like clicking stream on YouTube next to the camera operator. We'll need RE volunteers, and we'll need some folks to do hands-on buildings and grounds setup over the summer. Things like painting furniture, cleaning out classrooms, and that sort of stuff. So if you're interested in any of those things, I would invite you to send me an email. My email will also be in the chat in just a moment. And with that, let us enter a space of worship.
Unto yourselves, be your own confidence, hold to the truth within yourselves.
Now it is time for us to light our chalice. If you have a candle or a chalice and you would like to join us, please do join in lighting yours and saying our words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. I'm doing our opening words today. Once I lived in regions with true tidal pools. As a kid, I went to the Chesapeake Bay just about every weekend during the summer. As an adult, I lived close to the ocean in New Hampshire, and I could essentially visit the ocean whenever I wanted to. In fact, I even worked 5 minutes away from the ocean for a while. I love the bay, although it is much quieter than the ocean. And I love the ocean with its constant motion. But as different as they are, both of the bodies have tidal pools. As the tidal pools change and the water moves out in what I as a kid thought was a really mysterious wonder, small pools are left behind. The water in the pool warms up quickly if the tide changes while the sun is up. And as a child, I loved to step into the pools right at their edges, or maybe just stand on the edge before I got in the water. The water would usually be clear and not very deep, and it was filled with wonderful things to see. Small sea creatures were trapped in those pools until the tide changed again. Creatures with shells, creatures with legs, little fish, rocks that were worn smooth by the action of the waves, and empty shells. And sometimes I would find a rock at the bottom of one of those pools, sort of seeming to be the bottom of the pool before it covered up with sand again, that had designs that looked like they were captured waves. I learned from Scobie just recently that those special marks are called ripple marks. We all need a geologist around sometimes. For me as a child, they were just miracle rocks, as everything that came out of a tidal pool that wasn't a living thing was a miracle. Sometimes I would take rocks home from my tidal pools just because they were special for me. And sometimes when I would put them out as an adult, I wouldn't say much because people would come in and they say, "Oh, hey, that's an interesting rock." Somehow I think they knew that, they were my rocks and maybe I was a little rocky myself. And so I usually just kept quiet because for me, these rocks introduced me to the wonder of life. And I thought that these rocks represented the eons of life and how life is shaped by time in mysterious ways. But how do you share such thoughts with a casual guest who is seeing only an interesting rock? Well, I think that's why we come to church, to share our deepest insights into life with people who will really listen. Even if some people don't share my point of view, I know they listen, and I am heard. Now it's time for us to go to our opening hymn, which is number 74, On the Dusty Earth Drum.
Echoes of life awaken, notes of greening spring, rise and fall triumphant over everything. Slender silvery drumsticks beat the long tattoo. God the great musician, calling life anew.
I'm going to be sharing the story for all ages. I'm going to be sharing some of the pages out of the big rock. I know it's probably backwards. And I'm going to turn on a video or a screen share to do that. And then I'm going to sort of read a shortened version of the story. So here we go. The big rock. The big rock sits on a hillside in the Adirondack Mountains here in New York. It's an old rock. Geologists, you see them in this picture, are scientists who study the earth, and they studied the rock to learn more about how it came to be on the hillside. And they learned that the rock was very, very old. The story of the rock begins when it was a part of the Earth's crust. The crust is the shell of the rock that covers all of Earth. The crust is made up of different kinds of stone, and below the crust is hot weather. After many years, the rock that was pushed up by the lava that was underneath began to wear down. And after many years, mountains wore down and oceans flooded where the rock was. Simple plants and animals, you see some here, like trilobites and snails, lived in the water. After millions of years, the sea left. And it left fossils of trilobites and snails behind in the rock. Mountains began to rise up and the oceans truly left the area. Earthquakes raised the mountains and created the peaks and valleys of the Adirondack Mountains. When the earthquake shook the land, rocks fell, things changed. At first, the mountains were tall and jagged, but rain, snow, wind, and frost wore them down. You know, this is called erosion. While the mountains were wearing down, dinosaurs appeared on the earth in the lowlands below the mountains. The dinosaurs disappeared after millions of years, but the weather kept changing the mountains. Finally, the big rock was exposed, probably as a mountain peak. The Earth's climate began to change and colder weather arrived. Snow became deeper and deeper, and the lower layers became ice. A glacier was forming. It grew so big it covered most of Canada and the northern United States. As it grew and moved south, it tore the big rock from its peak and swept it away. The glacier finally melted and left the big rock in a new place with no plant and lots of rocks. A place far from where it started. Winds brought seeds, and over many years plants grew and animals came back. The mastodon moved into the newer meadows that formed. People came at this time. They were Stone Age people. They used rocks to make their tools. Well, today the mastodon is extinct, and the hillsides of the area are covered with fields and farms, and the big rock looks a lot like it did when the glacier left, but it is still changing. Weather makes it cracks. Chips fall off. Maybe in a few million years there will be nothing left of the big rock but a small lump of granite and some sand and soil. But for now, children can just enjoy the big rock. And that is the end of the story today, but not the end of the story of the life of the big rock.
Now it is time for sharing our joys and our sorrows. We are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. In all those deep, big feelings of our hearts, we promise one another, we are with you. So I invite you this morning to share what it is that lies on your heart in our chat. I invite you now, are there joys or sorrows to share in the chat this morning? This morning, we are holding on to the simple joy of seeing one another in whatever ways we can. We are holding in our hearts Scobie's friend, gratitude for grandkids and family members we get to be together with, and holding our dear members Liz and Harry in our hearts as well. For all these and the joys and sorrows left in silence, know that we are with you. And now I'd like to invite you into the spiritual practice of generosity. It is your generosity, your gifts that fund the good work of this congregation. Here we promise one another that in the service of the values that unite us, we will recognize the inherent value of each person, foster a community of compassion and caring for all, value our diverse opinions, and engage respectfully in all interactions. And we share a quarter of our monthly offering each month with a service partner who shares our values. And this month's service partner is the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust, which is operated by Soul Fire Farm in Eastern New York State. And so if you'd like to give to this morning's offering, there are a few ways to do so. You can give online at canandaiguauu.org/connect, or you can give by mailing a check to the church at 3024 Cooley Road, or you can give by setting up an automatic donation with your bank. And in any of those cases, we ask that you make a note that it is for this morning's offering that you give. And that way we'll be sure to share a quarter of it with our service partner. And we thank you for your generosity today.
Scobie's going to begin our centering and shared silence, our meditation session.
take a moment, find yourself sitting, supported by whatever it is you're sitting on, feeling your body resting essentially on the earth, gravity pulling you towards the earth and pulling the earth towards you. And from that place of settledness, tune into your breath. Notice the rise and fall. Notice if in this moment there is any tension in your body, and perhaps any passing emotions or thoughts. Nothing to do with them, just to be aware of those rising and falling phenomena experience in your being. And notice how the breath changes as your body settles in place. Notice how your breath may change in response to some passing emotion. And maybe hold the question, are there any two breaths that are exactly the same? Not a question you have to answer, but something just to have curiosity about. And have a quality of kindness towards yourself, an attitude of kindness in your being that is receptive to whatever is happening in this moment. Not to resist, not to put away, not to go into denial. Just to receive with an open heart your whole being in this moment. And now slowly Bring yourself back to awareness of your surroundings again. And I'll end with just a short song that I've sung before. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To live in harmony with this truth brings great happiness. All things are impermanent. They arise and they pass away. To live in harmony with this truth brings great happiness.
Now Scobie will share his sermon with us.
Good morning, everybody. This morning, I'm going to talk about two of my own personal loves, and then hopefully weave them together with this month's theme, which is trusting in transformation. So let me begin by telling you about the first of these two loves of mine. When I was a boy, actually, I still am a boy, pretty much. But when I was a good deal younger, a few years ago, I, of course, looked forward to school ending and summer vacation coming. Then I could indulge in one of my favorite summer pastimes. That pastime was to spend hours walking in the shallows of Canandaigua Lake, quite close to the shoreline, searching the bottom around my feet. And what was I looking for? Well, for starters, I was looking for living creatures. I'd slowly and carefully turn over flat rocks on the bottom, one by one, trying not to disturb the mud so that occasionally I could see what was lurking there in their favorite hiding place, what looked like a miniature lobster, a crayfish. And if I was real slow and then quick with my hands, I might be able to catch one before it darted away with a flip of its tail. I would then place it in a bucket of water for further inspection. To this day, I can still feel the sensation of crayfish feet delicately poking into the flesh of my palm as it scurried across my hand. Later, of course, I would return the crayfish back to the lake when I was done being a child scientist, at my mother's encouragement. But in addition to living creatures like the crayfish, there were other things that also captured my attention as I continued sleuthing the shallows of the lake. These were the hard shiny remains of other creatures, creatures that were no longer alive. Their remains had turned to stone. Let's see here. I may have some in my pockets. I don't know if you can see these, but what are these? Maybe some of you know what they are. Fossils. And as I'm guessing you also know, these creatures lived in an ancient ocean many millions of years ago, long before any creature that looked like you or me was wandering around. Now, most of these fossils had almost no human-like features. However, there was one exception. And every once in a while, I would come across one of them. Here, also in my other pocket. I don't know if you can see that, but Pat, bring up a picture. Ah, yes. What do you suppose this is? Yes, a trilobite with a three-lobed body. When I found one of these, I think some light bulb lit up in my brain, a flash of recognition. With trilobites, I think even as a child scientist, I intuited kinship and connection. How could I not? Here was a creature that I saw that actually had an identifiable head, a head with bulbous eyes, no less. And if I looked really closely, I could see that these eyes had numerous little dots that were its compound lenses. I was captivated. I remain captivated to this day. Trilobites had some of the same recognizable features shared by many of the animals that I was familiar with, including us, human beings. Today, I know more about trilobites, thanks to Wikipedia, than I did as a child. I now know that despite being one of the most successful life forms that ever lived on planet Earth, trilobites became extinct. There are no living trilobites anywhere on Earth today, only their fossil remains. The last trilobites died off in a great cataclysm of death during a period of Earth warming, a time when the atmosphere had a sudden dramatic increase in carbon dioxide. Sound a little familiar? And this caused the oceans to heat up to a temperature that trilobites could not endure because there was less oxygen in the water. But despite the demise of trilobites themselves, the blueprint they possessed was carried on in other life forms that did survive. And we human beings, along with much of the animal kingdom alive today, are the resultant beneficiaries of the persistence of that blueprint, with some modifications and additions. We are not three-lobed like the trilobites. But before I leave my first love, geology, altogether, I need to add another little piece to my show and tell. because it too has always captured my imagination. This is a relic one can sometimes find that preserves a little piece of that ancient ocean environment. Pat, could you show the first picture? Aha. So what is this? What's going on here with this rock? And maybe this can spur your imagination too. Pat, the video. I'm not sure that helped, but think waves coming in and out over an old tidal flat in a lagoon by the sea, producing this beautiful pattern of ripple marks in the sand eons ago, long before there were any people on vacation to enjoy a walk in the water along the shore. Maybe we could show that last picture if it's easy to find. But then there might be some canoers who came in on the rising tide. I love how the earth preserves a memory of its own history. The earth is both, you know, a planet and a historian preserving its own history. And it's preserving a history of its own changing environment, as well as the change in life forms. Just like this little time capsule here of some long ago mudflat washed by the waves. One can almost imagine a few little trilobites crawling along the sand on the bottom, not unlike crayfish today in the lake. I appreciate recognizing the familiar in the ripple pattern, while also being aware of the immense time lapse since trilobite time to the present, and the vast transformation and diversification of life forms since. Does this increase my trust in transformation? Perhaps a little, but it also highlights for me the uncertainties as far as the persistence of life, in particular, human life. Still, I am somehow comforted by the thought that whether or not human life persists, the earth will most likely. But now I need to change gears because I promised to talk about a second love too. I deeply appreciate, indeed love, Buddha Dharma. Buddha Dharma being the teachings of the Buddha. Many of you, I'm sure, have at least some familiarity with the teachings of the Buddha. They include respect for all life, doing one's best to refrain from causing harm to others or to oneself, and using mindfulness as a practice, both in formal meditation and in daily life, to come to a better understanding of what causes suffering, both for ourselves and for others. Hopefully, armed with this understanding, we may make better choices in life, choices that lead toward greater happiness, no matter what our circumstances. I imagine you also know that the practice of mindfulness consists basically of paying attention, paying close attention to whatever is going on, be it the breath or anything else in our experience. As one teacher, Munindra, once said, if you want to understand your mind, sit down and watch it. Pay attention to it. But while you may have some familiarity with the teachings of the Buddha, you may be less familiar with the Buddha's core insight, a deep understanding from which his whole teaching or Dharma evolved. The Buddha's core insight was that the only constant in life is inconstancy. The one truth that never changes is that of inevitable change itself. One might well ask, what's the big deal? Everybody knows that things change. But for the Buddha, this was not a mere intellectual understanding, not a mere passing thought. He'd been practicing continuously for many years leading up to the night of his awakening. He had developed a keen awareness of change deep in his body and bones on a cellular level, not just in his mind. His whole teaching was born out of this keen awareness of change. And what he came to realize was we suffer because of our attachment to the way things are in the face of change. Attachment, especially to pleasant experience, be it in the form of our material life and pleasures, our relationships in this life, attachment to our very precious views and opinions, and attachment to our body itself in the face of the changes wrought by sickness, injury, old age, and finally, decay and death of this fleshly form. But the Buddha took this understanding further. He did not leave us totally in a place of despair. What he further came to realize was that there was a path through to release from our suffering. This path was by way of loosening the tethers binding us, by giving up our attachments. What is sometimes blithely referred to as letting go. But as we all know, this is not so easy. There's the rub. Still, to the extent that we are able to let go, even a little, there does come a little felt sense of release, a little freedom from suffering. And this experience of release, even when experienced in small doses, begins to show us a new way of relating to life, a new path through those times when we are suffering. As the monk Ajahn Chah said, let go a little, have a little peace. Let go a lot, have a lot of peace. Let go completely, have complete peace. We may not be at the letting go completely or at the let go a lot stage, but even a small taste of freedom can encourage us to take the risk to keep paying attention. Where are we attached? Can we feel the stress in the body that comes from being attached to something? Feeling that condition of stress or tension in the body, can we watch to see if it persists or changes over time? And if it changes, does it get stronger or weaker or stay the same? Whatever it does, this will deepen our own experience that stress and tension are impermanent also. Our suffering itself, felt as a tension in the body, changes over time. This experience of the felt sensation of our own suffering changing can deepen our trust in transformation. And as trust blooms incrementally, we are better able to ride the waves of change. Not only that, but as we are more able to ride the waves of change, breath to breath and moment to moment, the sense of ourselves too begins to change. We begin to see that what we took to be our solid, unchanging self, not so solid, not so unchanging. Rather, we are a fluid, unfolding process of change itself, just like the earth, as geology shows us. Indeed, we are the transformation that we would like to trust in. And we are the mental quality of trusting too, simultaneously. That's pretty amazing. Framing our monthly theme a little differently, can we trust to be the moment-to-moment change or transformation that we are? Is it possible that this change of vision might allow for a little more freedom to come into our lives, including the freedom to act from a place of more authenticity, even in the face of the uncertainties of change? May it be so.
We're going to join together in our closing hymn, which is Blue Boat Home. now we'll close with our extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.